Back with another analysis video. Brian, we got a chance to watch, was it about 45 minutes of a practice? Not a ton to report there. We'll maybe share a few observations, and then it was media day here at CU. Carl Durrell spoke, and this is always the best day in the preseason, just to be able to sit down with guys. It's not rushed. It's not post-practice interviews, and I know we both got some great interviews in.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like you, there's not a whole lot you can get out of watching that practice today. I mean, it was nice seeing some people in person in pads, and seeing, I know we'll mention this guy, but like Jordan Tyson, just seeing some of his speed that we've heard about, and just seeing the size of a Travis Gray, just seeing things like that. Like, okay, now we're seeing some of those things we're hearing about. So there's not a whole lot you can get out of it, but the best thing for me is just the one-on-one interviews, and I know I had a bunch of good ones, and you did as well.
Yeah. There are more guys that are healthy out there today than when we saw the end of spring. I mean, it was starting to kind of look like a mash unit, and I know that's partly spring ball, is you're just not going to push a guy like an Alex Fontenot who's got a nagging hamstring. You're going to shut him down in the spring, whereas in the fall, he's healthy, but some guys will push through a few things. But Carl Durrell did talk about some of the injuries. R.J. Sneed wasn't practicing today, said that he's ahead of schedule from a minor procedure. They expect him back. Same with offensive lineman Tommy Brown. I even said Trevor Woods called him the quarterback of their secondary as a second-year safety, that they're hoping to get him back next week. Sometimes those timelines get moved a little bit if, it doesn't quite go on that timeline, but at least it sounds promising from a health standpoint at this point. But they're 5 practices in, and they've got 20 more to go.
Yeah, and I will say from the health standpoint, I know RJ and Tommy are two guys that fans are very curious about. Both of those, I talked to both of those guys today, and from Carl Durrell's history, I think that if there were serious issues with both of those guys, or either one of them, I don't think they would have been made available, because they typically don't make injured guys available. Both of them said that they're feeling good at this point. Tommy Brown actually told me, he goes, if it was old school football where you didn't need clearance, he goes, I'd probably be practicing. He goes, I'm glad it's not old school football so I can get better, but he's pretty close. And Durrell mentioned both might be out there this next week, and so that's a positive thing. I think both are going to be huge for this team. They're going to impact a lot of areas of this football team. So I think that's good news on those fronts, because all summer the fans have been curious what in the heck is going on, especially with Tommy Brown. Once that photo circulated of him on crutches, like what's going on with him. But it sounds like both those guys, both of them told me they're planning on being out there for TCU.
And Colorado fans might remember, if they follow recruiting, that CU was looking at possibly bringing in a receiver transfer. He ended up going to App State instead. Yeah. Part of that was because R.J. Sneed, they didn't necessarily expect was going to be back in the mix for the season opener, that he might not be back until mid-October. So that timeline acceleration is going to be huge. Jordan Tyson keeps earning praise as a true freshman. Daniel Arias again today. Yeah. It seems like every day since the start of spring ball, he's mentioned as a standout. So if Sneed is healthy, all of a sudden that receivers group looks pretty deep.
Yeah, for sure. And, and R.J. Sneed told me Jordan Tyson, I asked him, I said, will you tell me more about why this guy is so special? And he mentioned a lot of his great qualities, speed, and just, the way he works, things like that. And he said, I don't know if it'll be this year, but that kid's going to be really special. But I talked to Isaiah Lewis as well about the receivers, and he mentioned so many of those guys. He said that group is really good. He said Daniel Arias, said all the things you're hearing about him, they're absolutely true. He's having a great offseason. And he mentioned all these guys, and then at the end I said, well, what about Montana? And he goes, I forgot about Montana, but he's been unbelievable. And he said that he and Daniel have been leading that group with RJ out. So I agree. I think that receiver group, and Durrell mentioned it, he said that group's probably better than what we've had.
I had a chance to talk to 3 receivers today, and I like throwing this out there sometimes, especially in a setting like this, and to say, who's the biggest challenge to go up against on the other side of the field? And so those receivers, 3 of them said Joshua Wiggins, who was a true freshman early enrollee out here. We heard his name come up this spring, and so I think you asked a great question about, okay, you feel so good about these true freshmen, but it's a different thing when this stadium behind us is filled up and you're going against another team. Yeah. So we'll see with some of these guys, but it's clear there's more young talent in the program right now than the people that think Colorado's not going to win a football game this year, right?
Yeah, totally. And going off the young guy theme, Isaiah Lewis mentioned Dylan Dixon having a really good camp so far, and he also mentioned Jalen Stryker. That's not a younger player, but he said Jalen Stryker is really, he said, balling out right now. So, and he mentioned Wiggins, those guys. So there is a lot of young talent. This team is clearly going to lean on a lot of young talent. I mean, it's an interesting roster, I think, in that there's so many. 6-year and 5th-year seniors that they're going to lean on, right? Brady Russell, Isaiah Lewis, Alex Fontenot. But the other half is they got to lean on so many of those inexperienced guys. And I guess it's a positive that a lot of those guys are being mentioned right now.
One guy that might not see the field this year, but I think after just looking at him in practice today and talking about the maturity and the development he's made since he got on campus here in January, Travis Gray looks like an NFL player right now as a true freshman. He was a big kid last year when I went out to go see him his senior year at Cherokee Trail, but he's put on another 20 pounds of muscle since then. Yeah. When you walk up to a CU practice, that was the first player that jumped out at me today.
Yeah, he looks like that does not look like a true freshman. He looks like a man right now. And you're right. I don't know if he'll play this year, but it may not be the worst thing if he's maybe in that second unit and maybe he gets some snaps this year, gets his feet wet, to where next year maybe if a Frank Phillip moves on, people like that, some of those veteran offensive linemen, maybe Travis Gray then has got a little bit of experience going into next year.
Any last thoughts from today? Anything else that really stood out about your interviews or the open practice?
I keep we mentioned this guy, but Tommy Brown, I spent about 10, 11 minutes with him. What an awesome guy. I mean, a really good interview, and I was really fascinated by listening to him. I actually remarked at the end, I said, I just talked to you for 11 minutes. I didn't even mention your NIL deal, and he kind of laughed. But he's really an insightful guy and brings a lot of experience. He talked about just the benefit of being coached by Nick Saban over the last several years, and how much that's benefited him. I think that guy is going to be really good, once he gets on the field for this team, and we'll see. But he's been coached up pretty well.
All right, 5 practices in, 20 more to go before the season opener.